All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the East Coast for Chet. That is no Duffy tonight, ladies and gentlemen, just me running a solo broadcast here alongside a good counterpart and friend of mine from the University of Rhode Island, his alma mater. Out in the West Coast now, Joe DeLeon, everybody. Joe, how are we doing today, my man?
Not too bad. It's a lot earlier on the West Coast than it is for you out there, Chris. But I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain. Sunny day out. Excited to talk some football.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, before we get into really the nitty gritty, why don't you tell our audience what you do out there on the West Coast?
Yeah, so I'm a podcast producer at the Believe Podcast Network, which is the number one media outlet for professionals. We do a lot of work with former NFL and college football, college basketball, NBA, professional sports athletes, some TikTok personalities. So we work with guys like Pac-Man Jones, Matt McGloin, Amon Green, some really talented people. For anyone who wants to check that out. I also do cover the NFL draft and FCS football with two shows on Believe Podcast Network. So that's my background. That's what I do. How you doing, Chris? You ready to talk?
Yeah, I'm ready to talk. And I mean, you come from New Jersey. So a thing that I really want to dive into is usually at the beginning of the show, we talk about what's going on in the world of the New England Patriots. But I think we could start it out by really saying what's going on in the world of the New York Giants, really. What are some of the key moves that really need to be made this offseason? And Joe, you're a native of New Jersey, so let's hear your thoughts here on some of these moves that the Giants really need to address.
Right. I think the big one needs to be finding a trade partner for Saquon Barkley, but it sounds like with the movement during the combine, that's typically when a lot of these deals go down. So the Russell Wilson trade and the Khalil Mack trade, there was a lot of framework that was done when these teams were interacting in person. But it sounds like that there really wasn't much of a market for Saquon Barkley. And the reason why I'm saying that they should trade him is he's got, I believe, 1 year left on his contract. They picked up the 5th-year option. And with that last year remaining, now's the time to cut bait and try to get any potential assets that you can in return for him. Saquon is a great athlete. He's a fantastic, talented running back, but he hasn't played up to that expectation that we were hoping. He was the 2nd overall pick. They're tied up to a bunch of money because of how high he was drafted. Giants are in cap hell, and for them to figure out that cap situation, clear up some space, he's one of the first guys that you look at. You have to look at the players that are not performing up to the contract and the money that you're paying them, and Saquon fits under that category. I think a team with a better offensive line that's in a more of a win-now situation would be more enticed to go after somebody like Saquon Barkley. But if you're not getting anything better than a day 3 pick, I don't think that they're going to be able to get that return that Joe Schoen is looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the career stats here for Saquon Barkley. In his rookie season, had 1,300 rushing yards for 11 touchdowns and 91 receptions for 720 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Since then, it's been nothing but a fall from grace for this young man as he's really just trickled down from a 1,000-yard season to last year only putting out 593 rushing yards. And for me, it's been tough to see Saquon Barkley come into the league, get that stride of success that he's looking for, and then suddenly things start to not work because Giants organization is not addressing needs such as that offensive line, and then you have to bring the health into the equation on top of that. We saw back in week 2 or 3, I believe, against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Barkley tearing his ACL after rushing for -9 yards in that game. And ever since then, he's really been trying to battle back from that progress. But in terms of a trade, I think it does make sense that this team needs to get some value out of Saquon Barkley in this case, because this is a guy who, although has had very down years these last couple of seasons, he's like, what, 25, 26 at this point? He's still got...
He's probably younger than that. He's probably like 25, 24. I would say. I just guessing off the top of my head.
Let me see right here. I got his info. That 25 years old.
Okay.
25.
Okay. Which is young for a running back. It's tough to get a good explosive running back at 25 that's finishing up their first contract. Usually those guys are a lot older off when they're finishing up that first contract.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this case, I mean, for me, I don't know what team would go out and buy him right away because running backs really are kind of a dime a dozen it really seems that most systems at this point really just tend to use them as system players as opposed to being like a premier back. The NFL's really moved away from the premier running back just as because they just can't stay consistently healthy long enough. It's one of the most expendable positions. And for the Giants, though, to keep it grounded with them, a trade here could really entice them to go out for somebody in the draft or even, like you said, free up that cap space they have going on right now and maybe make a splash once again in free agency.
Yeah, and I for them this year, I don't think they're going to really make any crazy big moves in free agency. They're not in a position where they're going to immediately turn things around and win. This is a team that was under really poor direction with Dave Gettleman, spent all this money on guys that, some of them did decently, but Kenny Golladay, man, the contract that they gave him was terrible for what his performance was. And that, I think a lot of people thought that was going to be a slam dunk. So not too much of a knock on Gettleman for that one. But you've got all these veterans that they're probably going to have to move, like James Bradbury, somebody who's in the equation. I think that they're going to end up shipping off more guys than them actually going and pursuing and bringing them in. The one name that seems to make the most sense that they're probably going to actively pursue, and I think Giants fans and Giants media is a bit torn on this, is them going after Mitch Trubisky, the former Bears, former Bills quarterback. And the reason why that makes sense is because Joe Shane, Brian Dable come from Buffalo. Mitch Trubisky was Josh Allen's backup this past year. He was a first-round quarterback, and he was in a terrible situation. We know that Matt Nagy was basically trying to sabotage his players. So maybe you give him a shot. You've got one quarterback with Daniel Jones who was mismanaged and has some talent. Give him another chance. And then the way that you're going to motivate a guy like that is bringing in somebody else that is first-round talent, not somebody who's marginal. And, it's not like you're going in and bringing in Case Keenum. Like, Case Keenum's not going to do anything for Daniel Jones's motivation. He can step in when Daniel Jones sucks, and then the offense will still be just as bad with Keenum. But I think if Trubisky still has anything left in him, try and get him for a 1-2 year deal, prove it deal. This is an opportunity for Trubisky to show who he is either to the Giants or other future organizations if the Giants don't want to roll with him. But I think Trubisky is probably the big name to pay attention to in this free agency cycle.
That'd be a very interesting move because, obviously it kind of adds a little bit of competition to that quarterback core you got going on in New York. And Daniel Jones, another story there where when he was drafted, I knew I asked you right away the day he was drafted what you thought about it, because if you can remember, and I know you do remember that night of the draft when Daniel Jones was picked, Giants community was going nuts, not on the fact that, like, oh my God, we got Daniel Jones. It was like, you got to be kidding me. We got Daniel Jones out of the entire quarterback class that was there. Who were some of the names in that draft?
That quarterback class was terrible. It was the worst draft for them to have selected a quarterback. And the frustration for Giants fans was that the previous year they were in a position to draft Josh Allen. They could have gotten Sam Darnold, who hasn't been great, but still was a quarterback.
Yeah, was better.
Lamar Jackson was available in that class, and they drafted Saquon Barkley. And then the next year, they decide to pick a quarterback in a historically bad quarterback class. The only guy I think that was worth drafting was Kyler Murray. And if you look back at that class, nobody else has done anything. Dwayne Haskins is now on the Steelers since being on the Washington football team. Daniel Jones, as we know, sucks. And then Drew Lock was just traded to Seattle. So that was just terrible timing. It wasn't even so much like, oh my God, we just drafted Daniel Jones. It was like, oh my God, we just drafted a quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good, I guess that's a good way of putting it, because obviously looking back at it from a Patriots perspective doesn't really make sense to me, but obviously now it does. And in terms of looking at Daniel Jones' career stats, hasn't gotten over the 3,000 mark since his rookie season, hasn't passed for over 20 touchdowns since his rookie season. And it's really just been an uphill battle for him throughout. This Giants team, it's tried to go out and get people. They signed Kenny Golladay, as you said, on a 4-year, $72 million deal. He was hurt for most of it. And then when he played, they hardly targeted him as it was. And people like Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, they just haven't really been what they've been in the past and who they were hyped up to be, really. Darius Slayton specifically in my opinion. And then Evan Ingram's still with the team, correct?
He's hitting free agency. He's somebody who's I would guarantee to be a lock to be out the door.
Yeah.
I mean, all these teams that are pursuing him, which is interesting that they're considering him to be a slot receiver and see if you can get him to cut a little bit of weight because he's a good receiver. He's just a bad tight. He's not a tight end. He's not built to play tight end, and he never was. And he was really good his rookie year when he was used as a receiver and was used in a cohesive and strategic way. But since then they've been asking him to put his hand in the dirt. He's just not built to do that.
Yeah. And because his career numbers, he's never really been an 1,000-yard receiving tight end. He's not a Rob Gronkowski. He's not a Travis Kelce if you're looking for a star. He seems more like a system tight end that could be used to block the run or even break open to get a vertical pass in some way. He's not really a deep threat or possession catcher, if that's what you're looking for in terms of that type of talent. Mm-hmm. Another need that I think needs to be addressed, obviously, I'm sure you as a Giants fan would have to agree, is that offensive line. It's just
right. No, yeah. Right. I was just going to say that it's been something that hasn't been properly addressed in what feels like since 2012 when they won a Super Bowl, and that wasn't even like a great offensive line. But what we do have with the Giants is Andrew Thomas, who slots in and has been fantastic, and you can kind of build your way out. All those positions can be filled with proper replacements. I don't think that they're going to go and spend the money to fix this offensive line now. I think that spending the free agent money is going to be done the following free agency period when their cap room is a little bit safer and they only know which spots they need to fix. But heck, with those first 3 picks the Giants have, the 2 in the top 10 and then their first second round pick, I would not be shocked if 2 of those are made on offensive linemen. And I think that needs to be the best strategy, is to go young and allow this group to just develop around itself. This team is going to be bad. Let those young players work together and improve as they grow into becoming NFL players. And for me, like guys like Ike Ekwonu from NC State, Charles Cross from Mississippi State, Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa, Zion Johnson from Boston College, Tyler Linderbaum, center from Iowa. There are a lot of really, really good options. This is a really deep class for offensive line. So instead of spending the money for a possible Band-Aid, I'd rather they just go and draft some kids.
Yeah, and especially, considering I did take a look at some of the Giants' key players that are going into free agency. One of them is offensive lineman, left tackle, Nate Solder, former Patriot. Obviously, he is terrible. Ever since he left New England, he's been a shell of his former self. And, definitely looking in the draft, the Giants, as you said, those are some very notable players right there. And do they have 2 first-round picks this year? Is it only?
Yes. So they have the Bears first-round picks. So they're picking at 5 and they're picking at 7. So that puts them in a really freaking good spot to, if Ike Ekwonu's still on the board, you grab Ike Ekwonu. And then if he's not, you wait a little bit. You maybe go and draft Charles Cross or Kenyon Green. There's so many good options there for them to take one offensive lineman.
Do you think there's any possibility that they might trade down if they feel that somebody's not suitable for that 5th overall pick? Because sometimes I feel some value is drafted a little too high and some teams aren't as willing to kind of drop down on the board.
So here's my concern with trading back. This is not the draft to do it in. I just don't think that when you have teams trade up, it's for a quarterback typically. And you would need to be banking on a team being that desperate for a quarterback. And I think that teams that are the most desperate are going to have their quarterback situations figured out after free agency, just like what the Broncos did. Like the Broncos were the best target for somebody to draft a quarterback in the top 10, and now that's taken care of. Because this quarterback class is historically terrible, there is not a single quarterback that is worthy of a top 15 pick, in my opinion, maybe even a top 20 pick. Somebody's still going to get drafted highly, but I just don't think anyone's going to be trading up for any of these players. Maybe Malik Willis from Liberty. But if you do get somebody picks up the phone and they want to go draft somebody that's available on the board, maybe trade back. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of movement this year because of that.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see as the offseason progresses. There's still a lot of time. I believe, In a few days, actually, free agency begins, I believe, right? Next week.
The legal tampering period starts on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
The legal signing period's on Wednesday, but we're gonna know, just like last year, we're gonna know who signed immediately.
Yeah, because most teams are already reaching out to players, talking about deals already. We'll
Right.
see what the New York Giants do going forward. But somebody who's already been signed, re-signed, I should say, this one came as a shock to me. I don't know about the rest of the NFL community. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers signs the largest and richest contract in NFL history, reportedly worth $200 million over the course of 4 years. $153 million are guaranteed to him. And he's staying in Green Bay. And for me, literally through all this year, I was 150% convinced Aaron Rodgers would be throwing in the towel and saying, goodbye, Green Bay. Goodbye. I'm going to bigger and better pastures. But somehow, even with everything that's transpired, he's staying. And to me, it's bizarre that it came down to this much money to keep him in. And
Well, his decision was going to come down to the money anyways. But
yeah,
as much as this guy acts like he's a win oriented quarterback, he has always been motivated by the money. If he wanted to win, he would have gone to Denver. He would have done what Russell Wilson did, or he would have gone to Indianapolis, any of these teams that are looking for a huge upgrade at quarterback. And he would have taken it for a pay cut if he wanted to win. But when $200 million was floated in front of his face, of course he's going to take that, because again, all he cares about is lining his pockets. And he knows that his time as a dominant quarterback, it's dwindling. He won the MVP because the NFL refuses to pick a receiver. It should have been Cooper Kupp. He's going to be gradually declining. He knows that at the age that he's at, over in the next couple of years, he's not going to be as good. Get the bag now and then retire and be happy. That's his goal.
Yeah. Sitting at 38 years old, already considered one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. However, me and my buddy last night, when we were in the theaters going to see the Batman, we were talking in the bathroom.
No spoilers, by the way.
No, I'm not spoiling anything on here. But we both were laughing at the fact that we're like, well, at least we get to watch him lose in the playoffs the next 4 years at least. Because I mean, when you look at the track record, like, okay, I shit you not, Joe. Literally this whole year, from like the second half to the end of the year, I had been saying this is the last dance. Rodgers is leaving. The Packers are going to go to the Super Bowl, and they're going to win the Super Bowl. I was totally on the bandwagon, thought it was coming, and you know what? I was just utterly disappointed once again. And at this point, I've turned my back on Aaron Rodgers, and I've just been like, this guy's a joke. He's nothing. Like, if you look at the Packers franchise, 4 Super Bowls, they have 2 of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, each only having 1 title.
It was all Bart Starr, baby.
Yeah, it was all Bart Starr. It really was. That's the OG best quarterback right there. But Aaron Rodgers, the track record, I mean, I can't even go over how great his stats were. So I'll just go over recent stats, being this season, 4,115 passing yards for 37 touchdowns, only threw for 4 picks. Unbelievable right there. And really just set the stage that the Packers were going to be a dominant team throughout the regular season. And then those pesky San Francisco 49ers come marching into Lambeau Field with wind chill below 10 degrees and beat the Packers. And Rodgers once again is stunned. And I mean, I don't know what to say going forward this season, but we've seen this formula too much. And for me, where Aaron Rodgers' career has been and where it's leading, I feel we're going to get more of the same, really.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think that this upcoming year for Rodgers' contract is supposed to be salary cap friendly, but that means the remaining 3 years are going to be extremely restrictive. They're going to completely, and I can curse on this, right? You said shit. I can say fuck, right?
Not that.
Okay, they're going to completely F up the cap situation. Well, you shouldn't have cursed. That's on you. You should have given me a warning.
Yeah, I should have.
You should have given me a warning.
Sheesh.
Well, you can cut it, even though this is live.
No, it's too late now. It's out there.
My point is, I'm not getting invited back. But my point is that the cap situation is going to be really screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
And to assume that they're going to be able to, build this roster around him and maintain a roster around him, it's comical. It's just not going to work. And I don't know, maybe this year they can draft a nice receiver because there's a really deep receiver class. But other than that, I think the next 4 years are going to be just more of the same.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of interesting because cap space is already an issue for them last offseason. The only person they signed last offseason was Aaron Jones. That's it. Everybody else, it's the same roster, same team. And this contract only complicates things even more because now Davante Adams on a franchise tag. Are they going to be able to keep him next season? No. There's no way you're going to be able to pay that guy unless, once again, he takes a pay cut. And that's the most talented, at least top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. And you know damn well he's not going to take a pay cut. So it kind of comes down to this stage once again. The Packers need to win this year, or that's it, really, in my opinion, because, I mean, or you sell most of the team, but there's really no room for any mistakes this year. This team needs to win. They're set up, once again, the 3rd straight year with the same personnel. They've got to go out and do something.
Yeah, it's going to be just gradually more and more restrictive, and Aaron Rodgers is gradually going to decline more and more. I don't know where you're going to free up the space, and I'm not a mathematician, nor do I know the Packers cap situation for the next 4 years off the top of my head.
I can check,
but the I mean, that's entirely not. It would be tough to truly predict how that's going to shape up, but regardless, I think that it's not going to work. It's going to be too difficult for them to work with. And I'm not a fan of Rodgers and the Packers' decision to do that. I think you drafted somebody in Jordan Love with the hope that he's going to start eventually. I think if you drafted him in the 1st round, you should just let him start and let him go fail instead of spending all this money. Because imagine the situation that they'd be in with Jordan Love running, leading this team. Obviously not as good as Aaron Rodgers, but they'd have infinitely more money to play around with because he's a rookie quarterback on a rookie quarterback deal.
Yeah.
So to have a couple of years, let him grow into the position, go spend money on as many premier free agents as possible. That to me is more enticing than spending and committing all this money to Aaron Rodgers just to make him happy and just to keep him around for his final days.
And as of right now, looking at the Green Bay Packers cap space situation, it is estimated about negative $44 million right now. So they're already in the hole.
I don't know how you're going to afford that.
I don't know either. And you can't, and there's players on there like David Bakhtiari. That's easily the best left tackle in football right now. You have to keep a guy like him around in order to protect your quarterback. And then Rashawn Gray at $20 million, Zadarius Smith at $16 million, Davante Adams at $25 million just from that franchise tag. There's a lot of just oversaturated contracts on this team that really need to be dealt with going forward. But besides looking at the money and looking at next season for how it sets them up, because, we got to stay in the present for now. I mean, this team's winning the North again. In my opinion.
That's not a hot take.
No, not saying that as a hot take, but
But, I mean, look who they're competing with. The Vikings are entering rebuild mode, and their defense has been terrible. The Bears just traded Khalil Mack, and they're going to be a couple of years away before they can really compete around Justin Fields, which is not a problem, but they're not going to be competing. And then the Lions, there's no argument to add to that. They're the Lions.
Yeah. It's like, are you going to expect Jared Goff to go out and win the Super Bowl with that team?
Never know.
Hey, you never know, I guess. But I mean, Vikings, this was the first year we saw Kirk Cousins actually look good, and that was completely overshadowed by their performance really throughout the season. I mean, he had a career year, and as you can see, the Bears are ready to rebuild. Shipping out Khalil Mack, that's one of the most talented defensive players in the NFL, even though he's up there in age at this point. Mm-hmm. The North's in shambles right now, and the Packers are really the only team that's still put together. And honestly, if you think about it, now we're kind of going back to thinking in the future. Really, in 2023, this could be a dog-eat-dog division if you think about it, because if the Packers have to sell most of their pieces on this team, they could be in the hole just like the rest of these guys, just climbing over one another like in the NFC East when like 2 seasons ago to see who's going to climb out on top. I really think it would be any man's division at that point.
I wouldn't necessarily say any man's division because, I look at 2023, the Vikings are probably going to be looking for a rookie quarterback. Or maybe they draft one this year. The Lions are probably going to be doing the same, or maybe they draft one this year. So they're going to be unsettled at quarterback. But the Bears, to me, in 2023, I think are a legitimate competitor for that division with the Packers because, as you mentioned, they're going to have to move all these contracts around. They're going to have to trade some guys in order to get everyone to fit under the cap. And if you cut down on some of the talent, it opens things up for now that like the Bears getting rid of Khalil Mack's contract really, really helps them out with their cap situation. Add a couple offensive linemen, some receivers. They already have a decent defense. Maybe add a couple young pieces like that. I think that team is going to be sneaky good in 2023.
Yeah, and as of right now, I mean, the Packers, in terms of next season, I don't know where they'd be in the playoff picture because you still got good teams coming back like the Rams. I mean, but the NFC's looking a little weak next year in a way, just by some of the teams that are shipping off. So honestly, the top dogs right now are probably going to be the Rams, the Packers, and then obviously, I don't want to say this like I'm saying this hesitantly. The Cowboys. Cowboys are going to be up there again. They're not going to go far, obviously.
You don't have heavy faith in Washington commies and their starting quarterback Carson Wentz?
Not yet. We'll get to that, obviously, but I mean that's a whole nother issue right there. But another big trade that we have to talk about that was really huge after this deal was done. Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos come to an agreement on an agreed trade to send Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos. The Seattle Seahawks received multiple first-round picks and second-round picks, and including defensive player Shelby Harris, quarterback Drew Lock, and tight end Noah Fant. Seahawks really got a lot in return for Wilson. Broncos got him and a fourth-round pick as a result. For the Broncos, this is huge for them because you're talking about a pretty solid receiving core with Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, and Cortland Sutton already set and present there. I believe Melvin Gordon might be up for free agency this year, but I'm not sure if the team's going to make an effort to keep him.
Yeah.
And you got Javonte Williams in that backfield. And that Denver defense, I mean, they shipped off Von Miller. I mean, he's up there in age at this point, but you still got a young core there with Justin Simmons in the secondary and Bradley Chubb on the defensive line. I really think this sets up a huge competitive side now coming to the AFC West.
Yeah, I was saying this to Sean, and Sean completely disagreed with me on it.
Oh, boy.
It gets really interesting now that Khalil Mack is in the fold, and I think that the debate opens up a little bit more. But I mean, I don't see a reason why that they can't be the second best team in this division. The Chiefs are still going to maintain where they are at the top, and
you think the Chargers are going to be number 2?
Well, I think it's a dogfight now between the Broncos and the Chargers. The Raiders they quarterback wise, I don't think they compare. But I mean, Justin Herbert has looked fantastic in his development. Year 3, I think, is going to be when he ascends. And you add Khalil Mack, that defense goes from being a liability at times to now being really scary good if him and Bosa are both still available. But I still think that the Broncos, with the more veteran quarterback, with the really underrated defense, and it sounds like Von Miller wants to come back. And I think if you bring back Von Miller, that's a home run to have that defense with Pat Surtain and Bradley Chubb. That is a scary good defense with a very underrated offensive line led by one of the best quarterbacks in football. To me, I think that this is going to be one of the best teams, not only in the division, but it's automatically a top 4. I was arguing second best team in the AFC overall. That good.
Really? Overshadowing teams like the Buffalo Bills, the Tennessee Titans?
I think that their defense is far better built. Right now than the Bills ones is. And I look, as much as the Titans are fun to watch, if Derrick Henry goes down with an injury, they're done again. They're done. He played with a plate in his foot. They lost to the Bengals. I just don't think that I don't think the Titans are that
Yeah,
good.
and even with what's his face? With Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, they're really the only reliable target is A.J. Brown. Julio Jones has really become a shell of his former self. The Titans, I mean, they needed a quarterback. I don't understand why they weren't in the mix for this, really, in any way, shape, or form. Because if I'm Mike Vrabel, I would be like, I need to get rid of this bum Tannehill. Because honestly, Ryan Tannehill is nothing short of a bum, in my opinion. I
Well,
don't.
to have a mediocre quarterback, and he's like slightly above average. He's not great. You're right. He's not good, but he's slightly above average. To have a
Mhm.
slightly above average quarterback in the NFL is better than having a bad one. And
Yeah,
it's tough to get an above average quarterback in the NFL. So I just they're probably going to keep him until his contract's done. But I can totally see that possibility to swap quarterbacks. It doesn't hurt to at least you know, take a chance at it.
absolutely. And I think one of the last few questions I have to ask you
Yeah.
is who won the trade here? Because I mean, there's really multiple ways you could look at it. But in terms of face value, what do you got?
I think Denver certainly it's one of the few even trades that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because Denver gets what they've been lacking, which is a quarterback to lead a team that has a really good defense and has all these other pieces, but was a quarterback away from being very competitive. That to me is yeah, that's always going to make you the biggest winner in these situations. Uh, the Seahawks slight loser just because you're moving on from a franchise quarterback. It could take them decades to find another quarterback as good as Russell Wilson and the impact that he's had. But it does help that they get a first round pick back after the whole Jamal Adams debacle. I think that they need to move on from him. This is a team that needs to start from scratch, and the way that you do it is by acquiring picks.
Absolutely. I mean, the Seahawks, they're really set up in a good position in terms of their future. Obviously, Drew Lock is not the answer up front. He's really just a filler, a buffer while they go out and look for a quarterback down the line. Noah Fant coming there. That really helps set a good spot for the rest of this receiving core there because now you're talking about Noah Fant at tight end, Gerald Everett still being there potentially, and then Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf.
Mm-hmm.
Still solid. I mean, Lockett, though, I believe he is up on his contract this season. He might want to test the waters because at this point, hey, if you don't have Russell
Right.
Wilson there, what's the point of
Yeah, you
staying?
want to catch passes from Drew Lock?
And not really. I'm sure
Right.
Cortland Sutton had enough of it by the
Yeah.
end of things. But that does it, everybody, for Joe DeLeon here. Time for him to sign off. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate you coming on board. We'll have to have you on again.
Yeah, of course, Chris. Always a pleasure to hop on and chat with you. We'll touch base, I'm sure, soon. Off the show. But thanks again for having me on. Sorry for cursing. I usually don't, but you baited me into it. That's what happened.
I mean, you baited yourself. You said it before you
Hey,
could
you
say
said
anything.
shit. You said shit, so that automatically meant that I was allowed to curse in my head because by FCC regulations, those words, all of those words are not allowed. So if one word's allowed, that means all of them are allowed. So there we go. All right. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem, Joe. Enjoy that California sunshine over there.
All
We'll
right.
talk to
Have
you
a good
soon.
one.
You too. All right, so back to the news really here. With the Broncos trade at the end of the day, it really is a good table setter for them. You're in a good position. You've already got a solid offensive line, a young offensive line, I might add, and a pretty youthful offense and defense with some veterans to spare all over the ball. So for the Broncos, it's a huge win for them. You get the starting quarterback that you haven't had since the Peyton Manning days of Denver. You get yourself a guy that can get you in a good position to win now. This team is going to be fighting to the teeth, not only just trying to get that number 1 seed in the AFC West, but just any position to get a postseason berth. They were close last year. They showed signs of it, and that team is no joke. We did see them blow out the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. That was a big win last season. And once again, that was without the talents of Russell Wilson. That was with Teddy Bridgewater running the show. So for them, I like what I see out of the Denver Broncos. I could see them in a top 4 position going into the postseason. Who knows? Maybe they could even run away with it. They could come in and shock the division, take down Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. But as of right now, I have them at the 2nd spot in terms of playoffs. I think they'll be the 2nd seed in the AFC West, followed by the Chargers and the Chiefs being in first place. Russell Wilson, this really is a good position for him to be in because it's a position for him to win now. Now, for one of our final points here, we're going to talk about Carson Wentz and Khalil Mack. So for Carson Wentz, this is a guy who only spent a season in Indianapolis. However, Indianapolis proved they didn't really want him. They didn't like what they saw out of last season. And really, it kind of all comes back to that game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville Jaguars, all they needed to do was beat them, and it set off a chain of events that would really cause the collapse of the Colts' positioning going into the postseason. And it worked. Trevor Lawrence put on a show that game and really just set the table that he himself is going to be a good quarterback in this league, despite being on the Jags and having a very abysmal season, to say the least. But for Carson Wentz, this really put question marks on him. He did not have a great game, and this team was getting shut out by the worst team in all of football. So the other day, the Colts decided they had had enough. They were looking into Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, but had to settle for a trade with the Washington Commanders. Carson Wentz shipped over to the Washington Commanders, and the Colts received, sent a 2021 to Philadelphia. So the Colts receive in this trade a 2022 third-round pick, a 2023 third-round pick that can escalate to a second-round pick if Wentz plays 70% of those snaps, and then a 2022 second-round pick. The Commanders receive Carson Wentz and a 2022 second-round pick. This trade really stinks if you're a Washington Commanders fan, because that team itself, I meant to say, was in line for Russell Wilson or maybe even Aaron Rodgers in the aspect of looking for a guy. And this is a team that's really got some good weapons there, and primarily out of Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's had himself quite a career so far with the quarterbacks he's been offered. Carson Wentz on his career hasn't really had a fantastic career, to say the least. He did pass for over 3,500 passing yards this year, 27 touchdowns and 7 picks. He ties his career high in touchdown passes and career low in interceptions. That is something that's huge to look at and really take a positive note away from. But it kind of comes down to that clutch gene with Carson Wentz. He hasn't really proven to be a guy that can stay in there comfortably and make the deep play downfield or even just get the smart play off. He's just struggled ever since his rookie season with the Philadelphia Eagles, where he nearly went on an MVP run before he tore his ACL. He did, actually. He definitely was the runaway MVP that year. So for the Commanders, it's a slight, I'd say it's a win in a way where, although you do trade quite a bit of mid-round picks, or upper mid-round picks, I should say, out of the second and third for this guy, you still get a second-round pick in return. The Colts know what they dealt with here, and the Commanders don't want to get screwed in this deal. So this deal seems pretty solid in terms of the fact that you get a guy that sure, isn't the best guy you could ask for, but he's something, and he's an upgrade from what you've had in the past. You can't have guys like Kyle Allen or Dwayne Haskins running the show. Even Taylor Heineke. Taylor Heineke, he's an all right quarterback, but is he an everyday starter? I don't think so. As much as people like him, he's just not a quarterback I'd want to have leading my team towards a Super Bowl win. So that brings us to the final ticker here on tonight, and it's going to have to talk about Khalil Mack, because Khalil Mack has been quite a force of nature when it comes to the NFL. He's a guy that came out of the Oakland Raiders at the time and was traded to the Chicago Bears and was easily the best defensive pass rusher in the NFL. Still is one of the best. Chargers are reportedly making a move on him, and the Bears are finalizing a trade with them that will send the 6-time Pro Bowler to the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are expected to give up a 2022 second-round draft pick and a 2023 sixth-rounder to the Bears in return for Khalil Mack. So Khalil Mack is the only piece they're getting back in this deal, and that's not a bad thing because Khalil Mack, you look at his stats here, already 76 and a half sacks on his career so far at age 31. He's a guy that will easily reach 100 by the time he leaves this league. But for the Chargers, this once again sets up a very competitive side to this team. This is a team that really needs a lot of things done here in order to get them on the road to being a successful team. Joey Bosa being there is huge, but he needs another guy to complement him. And you know what? Khalil Mack, he's definitely that guy. But at the end of the day, with the Chargers, for me, is I like this move. It's going to definitely help them a lot, but they need to figure out something that doesn't really cause inconsistencies in these games we've seen them play in. There's been plenty of times where they're up on their opponent or they're struggling to get back into a game. It's only when they're not leading that this team is suddenly just kind of, they just can't put it together. It's just one of those weird things with this team. They really show a lot of talent. They just got Mike Williams back yesterday, re-signing him. That was huge. Keeping him and Keenan Allen around and pieces like that on the offense is what's going to make this team successful. But it's going to come down to the coaching because at the end of the day, this team has proven to me that they're just not ready for the big stage. They missed out on that. We watched them prove it to us on that thrilling Week 18 game between them and the Las Vegas Raiders, which nearly ended in a tie, which would have resulted in both teams making the postseason. And not to say that, hey, we didn't throw the game, we should have thrown the game and that sort of thing, but it's like you need to beat your opponent. That's what you want at the end of the day. You don't want to settle for, hey, we both win, we're both in type deal. But for the Chargers here, it was their one way to get into a postseason berth for the first time in nearly 5 years at this point, I'd say. And they whiffed on it. This team is getting close, ladies and gentlemen. Mark my words, they're very close to getting back to that stage that they need to be. But there's some things they need to shake up on because right now, what we've seen the past few years, and people I know who root for the Chargers or even know about, know anything about football, know the Chargers, they do Charger things. And those things are not positive, I'll tell you that. They do a lot of things to shoot themselves in the foot. But Khalil Mack, this is a big step in the right direction in terms of bringing talent to your roster and giving hope to your playoffs, really, getting a chance to be in there this season. So once this trade's finalized, this will be huge for the Chargers going forward, adding a big piece of talent and really setting themselves in a competitive spot between the Las Vegas Raiders, the Denver Broncos, and the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not going to finish number one. I'll tell you that right now. And I'm sure most of you know that as it is, but they'll be in a good spot to try and make a postseason run. So that does it for me tonight, I should say, instead of us. No Duffy here. And Duffy ended up getting himself a nice gig tonight with URI Campus Rec. I believe he's doing some commentating. Besides doing commentating here with us, he's really trying to spread his wings. So good for that guy, I guess. But, he'll be on next week. We'll be back here next week as usual. And we might have ourselves a special episode next week with the state champions of Division I hockey. That game is going on right now between the Bishop Hendricken Hawks and the East Greenwich Avengers at the Providence College at Schneider Arena. So whoever wins that game, Duffy and I will probably bring on and give a spotlight to and have some nice discussion about these players, their season, and just who they are. So be sure to check into that. That'll be next Thursday at 7 p.m., our normal time here on Unapologetic. And we will catch you all then. Thank you all for tuning in to Unapologetic with Chet and Duffy here on Fans Only Sports Network. And we'll catch you next week at 7 p.m. This is Chet signing off. And as always, go Pats. Peace.